Alrighty. So the first topic in this module 2, is market structures. Okay, so the first objective is to define the goals of a firm. So the objective of any firm is to maximize profits. So any firm would want to operate to maximize profits, which is kind of obvious, I guess, which is the difference between the total revenue from the sale of output and opportunity cost of attracting resources to the firm. Other goals of the firm are growth, satisfying, sales and revenue maximization, and market dominance. Okay? Um, so there are kind of three types of profits in economics. So the first type of profit is accounting profit. And accounting profit is kind of the profit that you would see everywhere. It's total revenue minus explicit costs. So how much you make, subtracted from like your costs. Got it? And
Yeah.
accounting profit ignores opportunity cost of using one's resources. So I'm not sure if you discussed opportunity cost, but you're supposed to discuss, I think it was one of the first things you learned in module 1. It's like any the next best alternative foregone. So if you're at school now, um, your opportunity cost may be, I don't know, to like start a business or something. So if you weren't going to school, what's like the next best alternative that you would have done? The value of that. So economic profit, and sometimes it could be known as abnormal profit, is the total revenue minus all costs, both implicit and explicit. So it this is the opportunity. So it counts in opportunity costs. So you would count in like factor in all the time that you used and basically everything. So yeah, and a normal profit is I think I have a typo here. I'm not sure, but I have here that normal profit goes to accounting profit on economic profit. I have to go back and figure this out. Um, the concept of market structure. Um, Usually when I wanted you to watch this YouTube video, but usually when I try to show these YouTube videos, like they don't um, play on when I'm sharing my screen. I'm still gonna play and you can tell me if you can see it. If not, I would just send you the link.
Hey.
Alright, so the concept of market structure. Market structure refers to how different industries are classified and differentiated based on their degree and nature of competition for goods and services. It is based on the characteristics that influence the behavior and outcomes of companies working in a specific market. Okay, so there are four types of market structures that we learned in module 2, and the four types are perfect competition, monopoly, monopolistic competition, and oligopoly. So those are the four types that you have to learn, along with the characteristics of it, which we will go through right now. So four types of market structures is perfect competition, monopolistic competition, oligopoly, and monopoly. So perfect competition is kind of, as you can see in this picture here. Okay, so perfect competition occurs when there is a large number of small companies competing against each other. So usually these companies would sell similar products. So like homogeneous products, that's what we would describe them as in economics. And they have price influence over they don't really have a price influence over the commodities that they sell. And they're free to like any firm is free to enter or exit the market, so there are no barriers. So there aren't like really like the government doesn't really impose taxes or anything like that. So they're free to enter and exit the market. All the firms usually sell kind of like the same products. Um, Customers in this type of market have full knowledge of the goods being sold. So an example of this of a perfect competition could be kind of snow cone vendors. Um, Basically, well, it's not true that true, but most snow cone vendors kind of sell the same thing, like same snow cones. You go to like one snow cone, like you don't specifically go to a specific snow cone vendor. If you get what I'm trying to say, they kind of sell the same type of products. There are a lot of sellers, a lot of buyers, that type of stuff, and there isn't like much like barriers to enter and exit the market. Monopolistic competition refers to an imperfectly competitive market with the traits of both the monopoly and the competitive market. So sellers compete among themselves and can differentiate their goods in terms of quality and branding to look different. In this type of competition, sellers consider the price charged by the competitors and ignore the impact of their own prices on their competition. So, monopolistic competition is a little bit more um, competitive compared to perfect competition. Um, there's a lot more competition. Well, not really, but it's an imperfectly competitive. Monopolistic, oligopoly, and monopoly are all imperfectly competitive markets. And yeah, we're gonna discuss a table. I have a table down here, but we're gonna discuss that after. Um, Oligopoly. An oligopoly market consists of a small number of large companies that sell differentiated or identical products. And since there are few players in the market, their competitive strategies are dependent on each other. Um, in a situation where companies mutually compete, they may create agreements to share the market by restricting production, leading to supernormal profits, such an agreement. Um, in such an agreement, they work like monopolies, and this collusion is referred to as cartels. And cartels is an important term that you need to know for CAPE. It's in the syllabus. You have to like know about cartels. So um, then the fourth type of market structure is a monopoly. And in a monopoly market, a single company represents the whole industry. So there's no competitor, and they're the sole seller of products in the market. So this type of market is characterized by factors such as sole claim to ownership of resources, patents, and copyright. Licenses issued by the government are a very high initial setup cost. It has the power to control the market and set prices for its goods. So an example of a monopoly in Barbados could be Barbados Light and Power or Barbados Water Authority. They're the single company that operates in that market. Okay, and then this is.
I can
Pardon me?
can I ask a question?
Yes, you can.
Like since the monopoly market, since there's an owner for like a certain type of business and has ownership for that, wouldn't people still, try to create the same thing that that owner creates? Wouldn't they try to like make the same products too?
The problem with a monopoly, I think you're kind of muffled, so I don't know if I properly understood your question. But the reason why a lot of companies can't enter the market is because, as said here, is characterized by sole claim of ownership to resources, patents and copyright licenses issued by the government, or high initial setup costs. So there's certain companies that you would need copyright from the government, yeah, licenses, or like the initial setup cost is so high, not many persons are gonna try to enter that market. Is that what you're trying to ask me?
Yes, miss.
Okay, all right. So this is a table. Um, barriers to entry. So for perfect competition, there are no barriers to entry. Like I use the example of snow cone vendors. Anybody can enter, anybody can exit. You can just start selling snow cones today, stop selling snow cones tomorrow. There's nothing that really stops you from entering or exiting the market. Monopolistic competition. An example of monopolistic competition are like fast food restaurants. So like there's Burger King, there's KFC, there's a whole bundle of other fast food restaurants kind of sell. There's not really any barriers to entry and exit the market. Okay. Oligopoly is there are very few barriers to entry, and that's why with an oligopoly there is very little competition and there's very not that many sellers, I guess. So kind of an example of an oligopoly is like cell phone companies. So there aren't really that many cellular phone companies in the world when you really think of it. There's Apple, there's Samsung, and then there's like a few others, but there isn't really that many. And no like regular person can just enter and exit the market and decide to sell cell phones, obviously, because there's a huge setup cost, a huge initial cost, and that type of stuff. So there's still like barriers, right? And for Monopoly, there are many barriers to entry. That is why only there's only one company ruling that market. So an example of a monopoly in Barbados is there's the Barbados Water Authority. So that's the only company in Barbados who deals with water. Or there's Light and Power. So that's the only company in Barbados who deals with electricity. Okay. Then we're talking about control over market price. So perfect competition is a price taker. In perfect competition, any individual who enters the market will take the price of the market. So I use the example of snow cone vendors. If tomorrow you decide that you're going to sell snow cones, you are going to enter the market and you're going to sell your snow cones at the same price that everybody's going to sell it at. You can't really increase your price because it doesn't make any sense, because if you increase your price, nobody's going to really buy from you, because as we said, the products are kind of identical, homogenous. So nobody's going to really come to you to buy your products if you increase price, because they can get the same thing from other people. So anybody in a perfectly competitive market are price takers. So they enter the market and they will sell at the same price that everybody else in the market is selling at. They will not lower their price because it really doesn't make any sense to lower their price. They will be getting the money at the same price as everybody else. And a monopolistic competition. From here on, monopolistic competition, oligopoly, and monopoly, they're all imperfect competition. Perfect competition is the only perfect competition, as seen by the name. Monopolistic, oligopoly, and monopoly are all categorized as imperfect competition. So, monopolistic competition, there are price setters. So they come in the market and they can kind of just set their price however they would like. Um, Oligopolies also price setters, and monopoly is definitely a price setter. They're literally the only company who's operating in the market. They can set the price to anything that they would like to set the price to. Okay. And now we're talking about the nature of the good. So in perfect competition, goods are homogeneous. So everybody's selling identical products. Okay. Um, in a monopolistic competition, there's slightly differentiated products. So everybody isn't selling the exact same thing. So as we talk about an example of monopolistic competition in fast food restaurants, so we can talk about Burger King, KFC. There's so many other fast food restaurants. They kind of sell the same thing, but they're different. If you understand what I'm trying to say, so they're differentiated. Um, Oligopoly also the nature of the goods that they sell are differentiated. So an example of oligopolies are car companies. So there aren't that many. There are a lot of car companies, but when you look at it in like the world, um, there are very few car companies, and their cars would be slightly differentiated. So you could tell the difference between a BMW and a Toyota and that type of stuff. And a monopoly, the nature of a good is a single good, so they only sell like one single good. So as I was talking about the examples of Barbados Water Authority, it's literally just water that they're selling, and light and power, just power. Okay. The number of buyers and sellers. So in perfect competition, there are many buyers, there are many sellers. Monopolistic competition, there are many buyers and there are few sellers. Okay. Oligopoly, there are many sellers, many buyers, and many sellers. And in a monopoly, there are many buyers and only one seller. Okay, so all of the market structures have many buyers because it's like the same amount of people that are buying. So for a number of buyers, all of them are many. You just kind of have to know the difference between the number of sellers for all of them. Competitive behavior and performance. So in perfect competition, there's little competition. I think I have this wrong. I'm not sure. I'll have to check that. But I have here in perfect competition, there's very little competition. Monopolistic, very little competitive. Oligopoly is highly competitive, and monopoly is highly competitive. I think it's supposed to be the other way around, though I would have to check because I don't think that makes sense. And examples, as we talked about, snow cone vendors. An example of perfect competition, snow cone vendors. An example of monopolistic competition are fast food restaurants. Oligopoly, they're car companies and cellular phone companies. And monopoly, there's Barbados Water Authority, there's Light and Power. Okay, so here, it's distinguished among the different market structures. That's kind of what I did here. You should be able to distinguish. They could bring a question to distinguish between a perfect competition and a monopoly, and you should be able to differentiate between the two. Like state, what's the differences between the two. Okay. So these are kind of questions that I have here to just make sure that you understand. So, first question is define zero economic profit. So, remember we talked about how economic profit is it can be also called abnormal profit, and it's basically total revenue minus all costs. So it's minus implicit cost and explicit cost. So it's the cost, like the physical cost of buying um raw materials, all of that type of stuff, and like the time you're taking to do everything, what you could be doing instead of working, all that type of stuff. Those are implicit costs. Okay, so zero economic profit occurs when um, your total revenue is equal to like your costs. So your total revenue is equal to the physical costs and all of your implicit costs, so the time that you're taking to do everything, um, opportunity costs, all of that type of stuff. Okay? Explain the concept of market structure. So market structure is basically how different industries are classified and differentiated based on their degree and nature of competition for goods and services. Is pretty That's pretty self-explanatory. Question 3, they said list the four market structures. Do you want to do you remember the four market structures? Do you want to list them, or do you want me to list them?
I can attempt it. Is it monopoly, oligopoly,
Mm-hmm.
um, imperfect competition, perfect competition?
Okay, you got three of them.
Uh,
So perfect competition. There's perfect competition. Remember there are four. So one is perfect and three are imperfect. The first one is perfect competition, monopolistic competition, oligopoly, and monopoly.
oh, so
Okay. List four characteristics used to distinguish among the types of market structures. So, four characteristics used to distinguish among the different types of market structures. Remember the table that we discussed? So, it could be barriers to entry, control over market price, nature of goods, number of buyers, number of sellers, competitive behavior, and performance. Those are the characteristics that are used to distinguish among the different types of market structures. Okay, so identify the market structure with the least competition, and the market structure with the least competition is actually monopoly. Yeah. Because inside of the monopoly there is very little competition. Um, it's literally just one firm operating in that market, so there's no competition. They don't have any competition with any other firms, businesses, anything. So least competition is a monopoly. And identify the market structure with the most competition. The market structure with the most competition is the perfect, perfectly competitive market, and it's kind of because there are like many buyers, many sellers. There are a lot of firms inside of the market, so there's a lot of competition. Okay. Um, all right. In a perfectly competitive market, all firms in the market are assumed to be producing A. Identical products, B. Differentiated products, C. Products that are heavily advertised, and D. Complementary products. Do you want to try answering this one?
yes, it is. A?
And and perfectly is identical products. Yeah, it's A. They all in a perfectly competitive market. They're all selling the exact same thing. Okay. Question 5. what is the most efficient market structure? Well, I didn't tell you what was the most efficient market structure, but you want to take a guess?
This is it. Oligopoly,
No. It's
monopoly.
no. It's the perfectly competitive market. It's the most efficient market structure.
Miss how because if you can just go into business that quickly, like you made an example of a snow cone vendor.
Mm-hmm.
They can start selling snow cones today, and if
Mm-hmm.
they don't want to, they can start tomorrow. So how is it competitive exactly? If they could just leave business like that.
Well, it's the most efficient. Well, by efficient in economics, it doesn't mean that it's very practical. They're just talking about like by efficient they mean it's like the perfect type of market structure. So everything that operates in the perfectly competitive market structure is basically perfect. There's like the perfect amount of competition. There's the perfect amount of like buyers, sellers. All the products are identical. Everything like that. That doesn't mean that is practical because it definitely is not. And there hardly are any like firms or any markets that operate in a perfectly competitive market structure. So it's just very it's an efficient market structure, but that doesn't mean that it's practical. Got it?
Yes, miss.
Okay. And list the characteristics of the most efficient market structure. So the most efficient market structure that we just discussed was the perfectly competitive market. Do you want to try listing the characteristics of the a perfectly competitive market? So barriers to entry. Are there any barriers to entry?
No?
No, right. Control over market price. So are they a price taker or are they a price setter?
I guess they set their own prices like the snow cone vendor.
No, they're a price. They're actually a price taker. That's the only market structure that's a price taker. So when they enter the market, they would take the price that is already set by the market. So they would take it. They aren't setting any new prices. For
Oh, I
yeah. So
totally forgot.
the imperfectly competitive markets are all price setters. So they set their own prices, but in a perfectly competitive market, firms are price takers. They come in the market and they take this the price that was already set by the market. They're not going to create a new price. They're not going to increase their price because if you increase their price, as I discussed earlier, nobody's going to buy from them because remember they're all selling the same types of products, so nobody's going to buy from them. And if they decrease their price, they wouldn't do that because they can make the same amount as everybody else if they keep the price at the same level. Um, nature of good. So the nature of good is, do you wanna guess that one? What is the nature of good that that perfectly competitive market structures sell? It was in a multiple choice over here.
It's sort of the idea.
Right. So they sell identical products. So all of the products are basically the same. Um, number of sellers. How many sellers? Are there like a lot of sellers, one seller, very little sellers?
Necessarily little sellers since they can go into the business and they can leave the next day.
No, there are actually many sellers in perfect competition. There are many sellers and there are many buyers. Competitive behavior and performance, and there It's a very competitive market structure. Question 6. Which of the following firms best fits the definition of a monopoly? I don't know if this. Yeah. You want to take a guess at this one? Of a monopoly. Remember what a monopoly is? When there's one single company ruling basically the entire market. So do you want to take a guess and see which one of these which one of these firms best fits the definition of a monopoly?
Okay, miss.
Pardon me?
I said okay, sure.
Oh, okay.
Is it like a company that you said with in Barbados, a water company that basically I guess them alone sell a certain type of products and they have complete ownership of said
Yes.
products?
Yes. So I have here listed four different types, right? So there's General Motors, there's Exxon Mobil, a local electric company, and AT&T. So this isn't like the a perfect question because obviously you wouldn't know a monopoly unless you're like kind of in the market and you know of of the company. But in this instance, it would be a local electric utility because remember we discussed that Motors, a company that sells cars, is an oligopoly because there isn't only one company that sells cars. There are a few companies. Same with mobile companies, same with AT&T, which is a telephone company, I think. So a local electric utility would be a monopoly since it's literally one single firm um, selling, like, basically selling power. And question 7, okay. Which of the following is a characteristic of a perfectly competitive market?
Is it perfect competition?
Yeah. Which of the following is the characteristics of a perfect competitive market?
Is it oligopoly and perfect competition?
No. The question asks which of the following is a characteristic of a perfectly competitive market. So, which of the following is which of these questions here, well, not questions, statements here is a perfect like explanation to a company operating in perfect competition. So they have A, individual firms can exert a perceptible, oh, perceptible. I really don't know what that word is. Influence on the market price. So that basically means that they can just enter the market and just set a price that they want to set. Then the second one says the firm in the market produce differentiated products. So their products are different. There is free entry and exit into and from the market. So they can enter and exit how they would like. And the last one is there is only one seller. So which of these best describes a firm operating in perfect competition?
Unless they can enter and exit at any time.
Yes. And question 8. That says compare the characteristics of the monopolistic market structure with those of a perfectly competitive market structure. So when they're asked to compare the characteristics of markets, and when they're asked to compare any characteristics of like any two market structures, these are usually worth like a good set of marks. It's you usually have to sit down and write a paragraph on it. And remember the table that I showed you? You have to talk about each of those characteristics. So you have to talk about barriers to entry. So in perfect competition, there are no barriers to entry, whereas in a monopoly, there are many barriers to entry. The control over market price, and you can talk about how when a firm enters in a perfect competition, when a firm enters the market, they're price takers, so they take the price that's set by the market already. Whereas a monopoly, they when they enter a market, they set their own price and they can change their own price, when they want. A nature of good in a with perfect competition, they basically sell identical products. All their products are homogeneous. Whereas with a monopoly, they're selling a single product. That's it, single product. The number of buyers, there are many buyers in both markets, but the number of sellers, in a perfect competition, there are many sellers, and in a monopoly, we know that there's only one seller. And in perfect competition, there is very high competition, and in a monopoly, there's very little competition because there's literally only one seller. Um, yeah, and you could give examples. It doesn't hurt to give examples. You could actually get extra marks from examples in an exam. So, yes. I'm gonna send these Word documents